It gives me great pleasure to now introduce Dr. Kandeh Yumkella. Dr. Kandeh Yumkella is the Special Representative of the UN Secretary-General and the Chief Executive Officer for the Sustainable Energy for All initiative. In this role, Dr. Yumkella is responsible for planning and implementation of the initiative, as well as engaging with the leadership of relevant stakeholders in government, business, academia, and civil society at the highest level to advocate for and promote sustainable energy for all. From 2005 to 2013, Dr. Yumkella was the Director General of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. Prior to assuming the mantle of leadership at UNIDO, Dr. Yumkella worked in different high-level policy positions, including as Special Advisor to 2 previous Director Generals and as Representative and Director of the UNIDO Regional Office in Nigeria. Dr. Yumkella holds a PhD in Agricultural Economics from the University of Illinois, an MSc in Agricultural Economics from Cornell University, and a BSc in General Agriculture from Njala University College in Sierra Leone. Dr. Kandeh Yumkella.
Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I want to express my deep gratitude to Kelly, Mr. Rockwell, and Mr. Chen for inviting me to share a few ideas with you, but also to seek your help to deal with a problem that I have. 3 months ago, I stepped down from a nice, cozy job to lead energy issues for the United Nations. I'm the first guy to have this job. There is no budget. There is no institution. I have to design an institution, but at the same time, mobilize you and others to bring solutions related to providing energy to poor people and also trying to deal with climate change. My new job is that I'm Special Representative for the Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All. So I'll do 2 parts of my presentation, tell you about what the initiative is, and then focus on why I'm here. We see 3 challenges that we have to deal with at the same time. In this world we live in today, about 2.8 billion people rely on biomass for their primary energy needs, amongst which about 1.3 billion have no access to electricity. So we have to end energy poverty. Second, developing countries and emerging economies need energy to power their economies. They need to power their economies in Africa, in Asia, Latin America, because yes, Lord Deben, we want our children and grandchildren to come to London as paying tourists, not as illegal immigrants. They need economic opportunity. They need to grow their economies. We need a world where you have inclusive economic growth and inclusive globalization. Energy will drive that growth going forward. And thirdly, what Lord Deben referred to, we need to do it in a way that, yes, we avoid the worst impacts of climate change. How do we do all 3 at the same time, ensuring inclusive globalization and fair globalization? Turning up the lights, but turning down the thermostat. Major challenge. I'll spend more time talking about that lady. That is not a bad picture. It's the real picture. That's smoke in their kitchen. I'll also talk about this lady. This is a picture that I made in January in my village. By the way, I'm from Sierra Leone. My village, you can see, is on a river that empties into the Atlantic. So when we talk about the worst impacts of climate change, we have islands already that are disappearing where I come from. But this is a lady in my village at 3 in the afternoon, coming home from working on the farm with firewood on her head. And guess what? She's pregnant. And she also had a 2-year-old kid. In my village at 3 in the afternoon, she comes back. She brought firewood because she knows she has to cook. If she's unfortunate, she didn't pick up water as well in the morning from the well, she has to go back, collect water, and she'll cook and poison herself. We know, as Her Royal Highness said, new figures, about 4 million premature deaths due to indoor air pollution, number 4 killer in the world, number 2 for women and children. This is serious. That's worse than HIV, AIDS, and malaria combined. Worse than HIV, AIDS, and malaria combined. Lack of energy, killing people, many of them women and children. So that's where I'll spend a lot of time. But for sustainable energy for all, we realized that if in fact we're going to have an energy revolution, that will also ensure we avoid the worst impacts of climate change, we must align politics, public policy, pricing, and build new public-private partnerships. Politics, because energy is a sensitive issue. We know that. I can tell you in the United Nations for 20 years, we would not talk about energy. It was in the vested interest of many countries not to talk about energy, because suddenly the discussion breaks down and it's about who has more control over oil and gas. So we spent the last 5 years coming up with a narrative that will say, let's talk about energy for development, energy for an inclusive globalization. If the politics is right, the right public policy will be in place. It's not only in the UK, but it's everywhere else in the world. So we believe we have to align the politics to get the right public policy. We need to build partnerships, public-private sector, because we're talking huge investments. Aid money will not do it. Governments don't have that cash. We need the technology and the cash from the private sector. But pricing matters. Pricing, real pricing for energy that also takes into consideration the impacts on the environment. This is why Sustainable Energy for All was developed. When we started 5 years ago, we had no intention of developing an initiative or an institution. About 5 of us approached the Secretary General. We said, look, we are happy you've invested your political capital on climate change, but we feel your narrative is not complete. You're not talking about energy. You can't solve climate change without dealing with energy as well at the same time. So of course he called our bluff. He said, would you like to chair a committee? So I chaired the first committee. We brought in utility guys, oil company people, small group, 17 people. We gave him a report. 6 months later, he called me back. Can you chair another committee? This time I want 40 people. I need solutions. And finally, 3 months ago, he said, step down from your job. Now lead the group for me. And let's see if we can build these partnerships you talk about. He himself has described energy as the golden thread that connects economic growth, increased social equity, and environment that allows the world to thrive. The new president of the World Bank, we still call him new, Mr. Jim Kim, also describes energy this way: ending poverty and ensuring sustainability are the defining challenges of our time. Energy is central to both. They've both volunteered now to lead an advisory group for sustainable energy for all. That's rare in the UN, to get both leaders working together, but more importantly, putting themselves in the front line to make the case that we cannot have sustainable development without energy being central. We cannot have a post-2015 development agenda without energy. In fact, after the Millennium Development Goals were declared in 2000, 3-4 years later, we realized that nobody wanted to talk about energy when they were being developed, but we used to refer to energy as the missing Millennium Development Goal. But let me tell you, it's politics. How do we bring it back in? People understand it, but how do you negotiate and show people that energy access is just as important as dealing with other health considerations? So the narrative we developed, we defined 3 objectives under the initiative: to ensure universal access to energy, to double the annual rate of improvement of energy efficiency, currently about 1.7% per year. We say we make it 2.5% per year, and doubling the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. These 3 put together, we've done all kinds of simulation analysis, puts us within 2 degrees, but at the same time, it provides energy to the poor to ensure they can power their economies and create wealth. But of course, you see, it's a message not just for poor countries. Those 2 other targets are in fact, indeed, for rich countries as well. They can change their energy mix. They can do a whole lot more on energy efficiency, but we're talking big bucks. The World Bank recently estimated that to meet these 3 targets will require $600 to $800 billion of investment per year over the next 2 decades. $600 to $800 billion of investments. That's what it will require. That's why we say sustainable energy for all. It's not about aid. It's about a public-private partnership where we use public money to leverage huge investments from the private sector, but also deployment of technology both in rich countries and in poor countries alike. In the current political debates in New York, we're trying to define a new development agenda for the next 20 years. We call it the post-2015 development agenda, but also, as you remember, in Rio last year, we also agreed, meaning all the 193 countries in the world agreed to define new sustainable development goals that will guide how international development cooperation would work. So our strategy is we define one goal, securing sustainable energy for all. The earlier 3 targets I showed you, these 3, will be 3 key targets. But in addition, we put additional targets showing that in fact energy is the ultimate enabler. One of those targets will be to bring to 0 the number of premature deaths due to indoor air pollution, that 4 million number. Can we bring it to 0 within 2 decades? To do that, I need you, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Also, to provide modern energy services to primary healthcare unit, we've seen a direct correlation between lack of energy, lack of clean water, and hemorrhaging, causing high maternal mortality in a number of developing countries, simply because there's no light in the hospital to sterilize equipment, to also allow doctors to work. We're developing other targets for energy and the food nexus, energy and clean water, energy and women's empowerment. Of course, my cousin I showed you in that picture spends about 20 hours a week to collect firewood and water, and it's keeping the girls out of school because they have to do that chore. That's our political agenda. If we achieve having an energy goal, it means we're making the politicians focus on the bigger issues of energy over the next 2 decades. We're getting there, we're doing heavy lobbying. So why am I here? I'm here to work with you. Kelly and others have told me that you have the solutions. LPG is clean. LPG can help me save 4 million lives every year. The International Energy Agency has also done estimates for us. We know we can reach 1 billion people with LPG quickly. We know you have the technology, you have the know-how. How do we work with you to get the public policies in place, whether in Nigeria, in Tanzania, or elsewhere, so there are markets where you can invest? How do we get the public policy in place that you know will be there over a long period for you to risk capital? How do we use public money? How do we use public money to leverage financing that you would need to bring those technologies so, yes, we can save lives? Not as a charity, but as a business that will be sustainable over time. That's why I'm here. I hope today, this afternoon, we'll sign a joint communique, joining forces, your association, my own coalition. By the way, my coalition is very big. I have 40 heavyweights in that group. Secretary of State Kerry, yes, the American Secretary of State just announced that he'll join that coalition. The Minister for DFID in the UK will join us, along with 5 other Ministers of Development Cooperation in Europe. Commissioner Pilbaks, who used to be Commissioner for Energy, now Commissioner for Development, is with us. We have a number of CEOs of companies, oil companies, utilities. It's a broad coalition. And Lord Deben, yes, our philosophy is we're not discriminating against any technology. The countries will choose their energy mix, but let's give them the scientific facts. Let's put the best practices in their hands. Let's create partnership that will bring the investments in. But yes, carbon capture, all of that, all of those solutions we need today if we're going to be 9 billion. That's what this initiative is about. That's why the coalition is broad. Politicians, heavyweights, businessmen sitting around the table where we can do those partnerships and we can drive the necessary public policies that we need in countries over a long term to get this energy transformation that we need going forward. As I said, it's about real people. I learned from Nicholas Stern that it is good to talk about science, it is good to talk about technologies, but stories matter. Politicians, I don't know if I'm right, Lord, politicians want real stories, real narratives, real examples of where things are working. The science is good, but sometimes you put them to sleep. You talk big investments as well, they say, wow, where do I find that money? But it's about real people. It's about this lady from my village who needs that power. And we know the technologies are there. We know the solutions are there. How do we work together to ensure that, yes, she benefits also from globalization. And with that, I'll zero in on Africa. Africa has about 580 million people without access to electricity. In Burkina Faso and Mali and in the Sahel, they pay more for energy than anybody, 30 to 50 US cents per kilowatt hour. Of course, there's conflict in Mali now. We don't see how you're going to solve problems there if they don't have access to energy. Solar can provide that energy to irrigate their agricultural lands, to create economic opportunity so people have hope, so that we have that secure world that the earlier speaker was talking about. But we also have to end gas flaring. In Africa, and I'll talk about my friends in Nigeria in a minute, in Africa, the gas flared can supply 50% of the electricity we need. But we've been flaring gas for 50 years. That creates inequity, it creates insecurity. There is no way I can tell my cousins in the Niger Delta that that's fair. There are pictures I usually show, and I do it in the United States. When there's gas flaring in the Niger Delta, kids are playing soccer at night under the flaring because there's no light at home. That's not a fair world. That creates insecurity. We can't do that in Tanzania or Mozambique that have just discovered gas. We need to use that gas to generate power. We need that gas and the oil resources there to produce LPG, that their people can have clean cooking solutions. That's the world we're talking about. Africa today is where everybody is going. We're sitting on huge reserves of the world's minerals, but it cannot be mercantilism. It cannot be a world where people say, well, we just go there for raw materials. They need an opportunity to grow, and if people don't think it is serious, African population will be 1.3 billion by 2030, 2.2 billion by 2050, the most populous continent. Where will their kids have jobs? If they don't have jobs, what do? There will be instability, there will be riots. They will head for Europe. I live in Central Europe, by the way, in Austria, in Vienna. So I say to my European friends, it's about enlightened self-interest. We create wealth down south and opportunity. Those are your future markets. We create wealth down south. They come home here to London to spend money as paying tourists, not as illegal aliens. People want dignity, they want economic opportunity, they want hope. We believe energy is right central in ensuring and driving that growth and opportunity they need to add value to their products, to add value to their minerals, to add value to their agricultural produce. You need energy right in the center. It's not about charity. It's about enlightened self-interest. These are the numbers we're looking at. 2.2 billion by 2050. I say to my friends, you can't build fences in Morocco to keep them out. Even with the fences, in 2006, 30,000 died trying to cross with boats to Canary Island. When they're 2.2 billion, you can't stop them. What you do is create economic opportunities south. Mercantilism is not good. It creates instability. When people lose hope, when they lose hope, they do bad things. I know. We had war in Sierra Leone for 11 years. They even did a movie, Blood Diamonds. We don't want that narrative in the 21st century. We want a narrative of opportunity, of prosperity, and inclusive growth. Thank you very much.